Coach Robb podcast, answering questions and eliminating frustrations about health, wellness, and performance since 1987.
Welcome back to another episode of Meet the Guest. Today I have Erick Bartoldus. Many of you guys know him as Big E. Today's show is brought to you by Precision Transport. Erick, how you doing, big boy?
Man, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on, Robb. I'm excited to talk today. I know, all these people that are going to probably be listening don't have any idea of our background and how far we go back, but I'm super psyched to be on the show today. And like we were talking about before we jumped on, I really, if somebody can glean something good out of our conversation, it's going to be worth it. So
absolutely. No, absolutely. I personally want to thank you in a public format like this. I know you're extremely busy. I can't thank you enough for carving out an hour of your time, and we'll be very cognizant of that, even if we have to do an episode 2, depending on how far we get today.
Let's go.
Yeah. As I said, I put together a video before we put this one together, kind of giving some people the 10,000 foot view of where you're at currently. But I'd like to back the train up a little bit for those who maybe kind of tinker around in the moto world, may have heard of Yoshimura, may have heard of your name associated with it. But if you don't mind, can I get you to bounce back? Coral Springs, you got this 2-wheeled bicycle. It's your freedom. You know, kind of like Lance Armstrong says, you felt your freedom when you had that bicycle. Do you mind giving everybody a timeline of what got you? And we'll dive into each one of the categories separately, but just give them a 10,000 foot view. How'd you get to where you're at today, Big E?
Well, I guess like we were talking again, when we're talking about before we jumped on, I feel like if anybody knows that Luke Combs song, that 5-leaf cover, that's me. I feel like that's been my life. And I just have an amazing family, an amazing group of friends that I surround myself with. And I work at an amazing company with amazing people here. I mean, I could complain about a lot of things, but doesn't make sense because nothing's bad, you know?
Yeah.
So I guess to answer your question, my addiction to 2 wheels started early on. My brother, my dad brought home, this is early back when I lived out on Long Island, but it's probably 1974. My dad brought home a CR125, an MR50, and a CR250 for my dad, my brother, and me to ride. So there we went. On Sundays, we went out east and went riding. So I was on a dirt bike, I think, before I was on any kind of a real bicycle. So that's the earliest memories for me on a dirt bike, is on a Honda MR50, and the little 2-stroke Elsinore. That thing was awesome.
I can only imagine. Now, in all transparency, I didn't realize you were from Long Island. So then you end up down in Florida, and down in the Coral Springs area, Bradenton area. Where were you at down there?
Actually, my mom, we moved to Florida when I was about 10 or 11 years old, and then to the Fort Myers, Cape Coral area.
Okay.
And then my mom and dad, probably about a year or two after we went down there, my mom and dad got divorced, and I always wanted to race moto, always the influence on moto. I had Tony D posters on my wall, Hannah posters, and just loved moto. I used to be able to ride right out of my garage into the dirt in the sand of Florida, and it was just great. But my mom and dad got divorced, and there was no money to race moto, and there was a new BMX track happening in Cape Coral, and went out there, and then the addiction to BMX happened. So that was my first race was in April 4th, I think it was 1979 at Cape Coral when it first opened.
Nice. I love it. Now, for those of you who have a BMX background, I'm going to kind of pull some milestones that come out of my head. We talked a little bit about it before we went live. I still remember you and TC, Todd Corbitt. You guys did this program, Just Say No. And I think, as we teased, you were way ahead of the time. You and TC were really setting an example. Just simply say no to drugs. You know, when you look at that time, is there anything that stands out? And I don't mean to put you on the spot, as you and I talked about, we don't have a scripted, outline for today's conversation. So anything that I'm asking, when I look at the listeners and I look at the things that they're really gravitating towards in this podcast series, It's how did you get to where you're at? And I think so many people, yeah, they can see Big E at Yoshimar and you're doing a lot of really cool things, innovative things. But when you go back to those BMX days, like I teased you, I remember you and TC at Zellwood, uh, your good old station wagon and TC's VW Bug, right?
Yeah.
I just remember those two with Tom Miller and that in Rex, right? Such a good group there in Zellwood. But is there any stage of that? Because you guys toured, UNTC toured on that for how many years before he went pro, you went pro? This would be before cycle, even before
I mean,
Cyclecraft.
yeah, I was probably, it's probably all in the span of like 3 years before I turned pro and he turned pro, but
Okay.
we were touring together about 3 years before we were like full-fledged pros.
And you were
Yeah.
doing schools, right? As well as
We were
this
doing,
whole-
yeah, we were doing clinics. That's actually how I met TC. Him and Lenny and Seth Basiri came to
okay.
Cape Coral. And I think Todd was 14 then. And I met him and we just hit it off. And that was probably 82.
Yeah.
And then so we just became friends. And then just to save money as best we could or whatever, we were sleeping on people's floors and however many people we could stuff in a station wagon. Like there was gas money to get to the races. So it was a cool time for sure.
Now, just for the sake of giving people some timeline, Cyclecraft was or was not a factory ride?
It was, yeah. Both
Okay.
both Todd and I were on that team. It was that was around 86. I was actually on Cyclecraft. He was on Murray at that time.
That's what I thought because I remembered him going to him and Shelby were on the Murray program together.
Yeah.
And then you were over there at Cyclecraft. Many of the listeners who are on the moto side of things may or may not be aware of the fact that, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think single-handedly, you have to get credit for bringing BMX into the motocross world from a sponsorship standpoint. Wasn't it you brought McGrath the first GT deal?
Yeah, I would like to say I would, that wasn't all me. So I just I had known Jeremy just from, obviously he was an up and coming moto guy.
Yeah.
And Eric Carter knew him really well. They were good pals, and Eric Carter was trying to this is like 1990 or so. He was trying to race moto at the time, and
Eric Carter was.
Yeah.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, back in like I'd say 1990, he was trying to like, hey, I want to try my hand in motocross. And
Wow.
he was good friends with Jeremy, and he just knew Jeremy from the VDC, the BMX days, like they knew each other. And I got introduced to Jeremy and we hit it off, and I was at GT and he was just such a BMX geek. And I'm like, hey dude, let's, we make road bikes, we make mountain bikes, we make BMX bikes. And out of all the, and it was really cool because that relationship even lasts to these days. I can call him, and we actually went for a mountain bike ride at Eric Carter's thing at Vail, like back in April, and it was just me, him, and TC, and we went on a mountain bike ride together, and it rained on us. It was epic, dude.
Yes.
But I think Eric Carter was probably responsible for really introducing me to Jeremy. But what was really cool is that relationship. We were able to sponsor Jeremy completely through his entire pro career. So from when he basically got on the Honda 250 all the way through the end at, in 01, he was riding with a GT sticker on his visor, always helping me out, whatever. He was always ready to do an ad for us. And he was just an amazing guy. And I think early on, he just had a different style about him. And the way he rode the motorcycle was so much like a BMX bike. And a lot of his competition didn't get that, just backsiding stuff. And just all the things that everybody talks about, right?
Sure.
By the time everybody caught up to what he was doing, he was pretty much getting ready to retire, right?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, he's an amazing guy, and just I think one of the most humble champions the sport's ever seen, really.
This is kind of a little bit of a glimmer into what we're going to be talking about today, because like you and I talked about before we started going live, I'm still a fan of the sport. I feel very fortunate, very blessed when I look at my phone and who's in it, and I'm like, wow, really? I can call Wardy up. I've got Lachine in there, and I've got Stewart in there and Carmichael in there, and I'm just like, dadgum, pinch me because it seems surreal. Stanton, somebody that I always idolized. I want to back the train up yet once again, because one of the things that many people are not aware of, for the listeners who are involved in moto, think about Lars at Factory Honda. He started by sweeping the floors, right? His dad was there. He just literally, he paid his dues and got to where he's at. I don't know that many people understand at the pinnacle. I consider it the pinnacle. Now, you may have had things afterwards with Robinson and some of these other teams that you're involved with. But when I was racing BMX, GT was like HRC. It was the team that everybody wanted to be on. It was the pinnacle of class and quality. Everybody's gear looked good. When someone was on the track, you knew that was a factory GT rider, whether, like we said earlier, whether it was Sheepdog all the way down to Jeff Schofield. How did you get to that position of being a team manager of the largest BMX team? At least, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seemed like that was the team that everybody wanted to be on. How did you get there?
Well, I wasn't the team manager for GT. I did the Power Light race team.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying it.
Yeah, so I was in the marketing department at GT. So I raced pro towards probably like 86 to 90.
Okay.
And then when I got to GT in 89, work really was kind of the priority and not racing. So
Yeah.
I was in the marketing department at GT, and I assisted Bill Nelson, who was the team manager at the time and did all that stuff. He was the dad of Danny Nelson, still is. And I just got to see somebody do it right with a guy like Bill Nelson. So I was on the road doing tours, doing clinics and all that stuff for GT at the time. And then when at the time GT had bought Power Light and back in 1990, and then by 1993 they were like, hey, we want to take this thing up another notch, Biggie. We want to take the helm.
Okay.
And so I had the fortunate of really just watching Bill Nelson do his thing all those years. And I was able to pick a really elite team from 94 all the way to 2001 and running the Power Light BMX team. So
now, would that have been when Tommy Brackens was pro? Who'd you have as a pro at that time?
So Danny Nelson was our pro on Power Light.
Okay.
Yep.
That's crazy to think his dad started as a team manager of GT, and then his son ends up becoming your pro for Power Light.
But I think you're 100% spot on whether it was the 80s or the 90s, GT was the HRC Honda of the BMX.
Yeah.
Really, really what was happening in BMX racing.
I think back to, it seemed like every age group, they had the best riders. And this is one of the questions that I have for you. And I want to bring you back onto our show, Navigating Amateur Motocross, for a completely different subject that I want to dig down onto. But for the subject of what we're talking about here today, how in the world did you handle being in a position where there's tens of thousands of riders around the world that you could have chosen? How big was the Power Light team?
We at time, probably the biggest it ever was. So we had a pro, and then the rest were amateurs. So we had probably one high end AA pro. Back at the time, AA was 1990s, and then we had about 7 amateurs on the team.
Okay.
So anywhere from like probably 8 years old, 7 years old, all the way to 18.
So when you look at yourself, right, somebody who comes from a divorced family, you jump on the road with TC, you guys are putting on camps, you're racing, you're kicking butt. You find yourself now with one of the, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but that whole GT, that entire group of bikes, that was the largest group at the time, was it not?
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you look at the idea, not the idea, but the concept of, on one hand, you get to be the one who strikes the pen and, hey, guess what? You're now on the team. How did you balance getting, because this is one of my big pet peeves with, you get young athletes that are really good and their egos get so big that they're unmanageable. They're just, for yourself, right? Here you are, an elite athlete, one of the best pros in the country. Now you get put into a position where you get to hire, and I hate to use the word fire, but that's part of the job, right? You have to let people go. How did you navigate that landscape? Because these were guys that you were once racing with, or like you say, at that point, Nelson's son, you saw him grow up.
Yeah.
Get a chance, but then at some point in time, I don't know if the team dismantled because of budget. So we don't need to go into that today. But how did you navigate that landscape? Because so many people see you at Yoshimura, they think, oh, you just kind of rolled up to Yoshimura one day. Boy, there's so many more chapters before you got there that I'm really interested in hearing how you got to it.
Well, I hope you have a couple of hours to talk.
Yeah, yeah, it's good stuff.
But then, I think, how did I navigate it? I think, honestly, like I always like to keep things very foundational. I don't like to get up in the roof. I always look at anything as you know, you're building a foundation, then you put the concrete down, the walls go up, the roof goes on. And I always like to really think of a lot of things as foundational, like making sure the ground's level, making sure the concrete goes right. Because when you get the foundation right, a lot of the things go easier because the walls go up straight. A lot of times the roof's going to be straight after that, and the whole house is going to be right, right? So, how did I navigate it? Honestly, I think I just did a lot of things with passion and looking at things growing up and what I always wanted to be. Like a lot of those kids on our team, it's like what I would have wanted to look like making sure that our uniforms were right, our gear kits were right, our number plates were dialed. When we show up at eating at Denny's in the morning, we all look like we're a team. When we're done racing, we go out to eat as a team. We talk about the racing, what happened. So it was more of like a family thing than a team thing. And I always wanted to try to really make that happen on our team. GT was a lot bigger. They had a lot more riders on their team, so it was hard for them guys to do that. But Power Light was smaller, and so I was able to really make that happen on our team. And so, and a lot of times, when you build things, and just going back to the navigating thing, when you build things right, the right riders gravitate to your program, and the wrong riders don't come. It's like a magnet turning the other way. It's like, I don't want to be a part of that. Those guys are XYZ. Okay,
Sure.
cool. This is the way we do it over here, right?
Yeah.
And if you want to be a part of this, this is how we do it. So, and then when it was time for obviously riders, they weren't performing or like up to par doing stuff. I mean, that's a hard part of it, but again, just I feel like those are life lessons. As those kids grow up and get jobs, they're going to move on, they're going to get hired and fired, and those things happen, and it's life 101. So it's like just preparing them. Same thing with me, just through my whole career, just preparing them for life, so when they get to be 18, 19, 20, they've experienced people, public relations, they've experienced traveling, they've experienced moving around to different teams because they've maybe I didn't perform, and maybe that kicks their butt into gear and that's happened. I've watched guys go off of our team, and there they go performing. Well, they just needed a kick in the butt, right?
Yep.
So, I don't know, get kind of long-winded on that stuff, but I think, a lot of that stuff is really basic 101 stuff that a lot of people don't get anymore because they're not experiencing those type of things,
Yeah. I don't know if you remember Alexander Fry, one of the top amateurs. He kind of came underneath the KTM program. He went into the engineering world after racing, and in part of his job interview, they kind of asked him what his background was because he'd already gone through and he got his engineering degree. And when they found out that he raced motocross, he went to the top of the list of the people that they wanted on their team for the exact things that you just articulated. You already know how to problem solve, you know how to deal with disappointment, you know how to divide and conquer, you know how, people don't realize when you travel, hey, your flight's canceled. Well, what do we do? That problem solving.
And then also on the side of that too, the competition mindset.
Yes.
There's not every time you can win.
That's right.
You have to accept defeat and swallow that and move on to the next race, So again, so many life lessons, right?
Yes. Well, to me, like with our company, everything's about accountability and responsibility. My world is all zeros and ones. You're either getting leaner, fitter, and faster, or you're not. Just like we were saying earlier, before we came on the show live, that's why I started Complete Med Solutions. People are having a problem getting their blood work read. We know the blood work is a foundation of health. We can hedge things off before they become a problem. I don't want to fix the problem. I'd like to keep the problem from ever arising. That's that proactive approach. Like you said, why wait till you get dropped by Power Light to realize you just squandered an opportunity of a lifetime, really?
Right.
Not to dote on you, but hey, you can be managed by somebody like Big E, empathetic, has a high bar of standards, but he's been there and done that versus going and riding for another manager that's just all about results and doesn't, really care about you as an individual. We just are here to win, and we're going to cut throat at all costs. Until you go and you get underneath the tutelage of someone else and go, gosh, Big E was really the guy to work with. Again, very, very competitive, but very empathetic. I think there's a key word. There's a difference between empathetic and being, when you can empathize with somebody versus sympathize with somebody, that's a very hard attribute to get in a manager, especially when your job is literally based on results.
Yeah.
And to me, it's about accountability. What are you reading? What are you eating? Like I always tell my young athletes, 85, 65 riders, champions have champion habits. If your parents have to cattle prod you to go to bed, brush your teeth, if just general hygiene is considered laborious for you, you probably should find another sport, because this sport requires so much of you. And of course, all athletics do the same thing. But
I mean, the things that you're talking about, Rob, that's all discipline stuff that it doesn't matter what you're going to do in life, right?
Yes.
It doesn't matter if you're racing or you're going to be a gas station attendant, whatever it is. Those are disciplines you need to have. Like make your bed in the morning, brush your teeth, like those kind of things. I mean, when you get that stuff instilled in your life early, dude, it's just a lot better,
Absolutely.
And then I just want to say, like, I know that you're so much about performance and you're so much about what you eat, what you're doing on the workout side, but like on my side, and you touched on it back when TC and I were doing things, like a big thing when I was growing up and in my life was the people around me and the guys that I would hang around. And I don't think, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think that's touched on enough today. Like the people you surround yourself with, the people that you choose to hang around with. It's a gigantic, it's so powerful that I think a lot of people overlook it, because like for me, TC was that influence in my life to stay away from alcohol and drugs and all that stuff, because we watched the stuff his dad went through, and there's a long story to that we can get into, but he was a gigantic influence. He was 2 years younger than me, but that was the thing for me. Like I saw somebody that, you could have a whole bunch of fun without doing all that, getting into the dirty stuff, right?
Yes.
And so we set out to influence people early on, like, hey, dude, you don't need to do any of that stuff to have fun. It's a total misnomer,
Yeah.
And then again, just like I was saying, like the people that gravitate towards you are the people that really want to glean something from you, and the people that don't are the people that are just like magnets and repelling, and they're probably going to go down a different trail, you know? So I really feel like early on in a lot of these amateurs that are racing, or really in any sport, it is so important that that you're doing all the things that you obviously stress every day, of just eating right, doing the right workouts, all those things, but also taking the time to develop friendships that you could cultivate that are going to last a lifetime. Like I've got friends, I consider TC one of my, if not my best friend. He's been my best friend since 1982. And like, we live 20 minutes apart, and we ride mountain bikes as much as we can. And, those type of things, as you get older and you're done with racing and you're done with whatever, and you moved on to a career, like those are the things you can really glean back to and look at and say, hey, look what we had fun doing when we were younger. And like, and you've probably experienced this, like when you spend time with somebody that you grew up with, it's like nothing changed.
That's right. Yep.
Because you have these bonded relationships that, like, dude, I know TC, if I needed it, he'd come over and take his shirt off for me and go, what do you need, dude?
Absolutely.
So I think a lot of that's overlooked nowadays. It's so much about performance and getting there and blah, 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 blah. Like, don't overlook the moment, right? Like one of the things I really dig about Cameron McAdoo, he's like, man, I'm where my feet are right now. I'm in the moment.
Yep.
And it's so important to not worry about the next race, about enjoying where you are at now. You work hard all week long, or whatever you're going to do. And you get to a certain race like Loretta's, and you get to a point where, like, are you nervous? Why? You've worked all this time. Enjoy it now.
That's right. That's right.
Let it flow. And then a lot of times, a lot of athletes let that happen, and they perform better because they can think clearer, they can breathe better, all that, right?
Absolutely. I think what you said there is it's a perfect soup bowl, because even though I'm performance oriented, I get fired more often because I don't push people like a slave driver. 1 day a week, you have a rest day. What are you going to do? I call it your currency, right? If you have a 9-year-old, his currency might be M&Ms. You have a 13-year-old, it might be his phone. A 16-year-old might be his driver's license, his new truck. Everybody's currency changes. But I always say, are you enjoying the process? Because if you're not enjoying the process, you're not going to really enjoy the final achievement. And then when you do get the achievement, who got you there? You know, I
Yeah.
always say to every one of my clients, if you want to be the next deadbeat, hang around 4 other deadbeats, you'll be the next deadbeat. And if you want to be the next champion, you don't have to hang around with 4 motocross champions, but hang around some surfers and some skateboarders, people that they realize there's ramifications for bad behavior. And this goes back to, like you said, laying a foundation. When you are flexible, you're more resilient to injury. When you are strong, you're resilient to injury. I'm not telling you to lift. I'm trying to get you to understand that lifting offsets the chances of an injury. Eating
Yeah.
healthy, don't eat healthy because I told you to. Think about the idea that if you eat healthy, you have a stronger immune system, which means less downtime, more ride time. To
Yeah.
be a subject matter expert of anything, you need 10,000 hours. So every minute that I can get another minute on the body, on the motorcycle, on the bicycle, guess what? You're a more durable athlete. You're a more mature athlete. And this is why I always say do things proactively, but do it with a purpose and an understanding of why. And that's why for you, at least for me personally, your story is so fascinating. I hope this doesn't rip a scab off, but it's not like your dad was a team manager for a motorcycle or a BMX team. You didn't have this blueprint that was laid out. Like you said, you had some good mentors, no disrespect to the Nelsons, but the idea wasn't in your home. And yet you came out of it. You came out of it changing. I can give you 100 people that I know that you and TC directly influenced. I could literally give you a piece of paper, or you can give me a piece of paper. I could write you 100 names down of people that I know for a fact.
That's cool.
Oh, it's unbelievable. And the cool part about it is you didn't do it when it was cool to be that person and then go behind the scenes and be somebody else. That's one of the things that I always loved about you guys. If we went to Murray World Cup and we had 6 people in a hotel room because we were saving money, and at the time you had some of these other race teams where you saw the underage kids bringing in the beer, right? I'm not going to name any colors of bikes, but off the air, you and I could talk about it. It's not that I was judging it. You and TC didn't do it. Whether Rex or any of those guys were with you, Tom Miller and that group out of Zowood, you had your core group. I just think it's what's so empowering, and that's why I wanted to have you on the show here, is how did you intuitively know what to do and what not to do? If you don't have a father figure at home, you didn't grow up in this corporate environment where it's like, hey, here's a Cliff Notes to the top, but yet you've been at the top at the BMX world. And we're going to get into Yoshimura and your role here. People don't realize your role with Pro Taper, all these other companies that you're involved with. I know that unfortunately you got kind of caught in some shuffles that were no fault of your own. But when you went over there, all of a sudden we started hearing about Pro Taper, where before you went there, in all transparency, I'd never heard of it. How did you do it? What was your blueprint? Is it just something that was literally God-given inside?
I think it was. And I think, again, going back to those early, I just love what I do.
Yep.
And I think I love what I do because I just grew up loving riding a motorcycle and riding a bicycle. I just love it. And I think aside from that, I had, again, going back to TC, right? Like he was like early on, there's a right and a wrong way to do stuff, right? Like if you do this, just like the stuff that you were describing, if you do this, it's going to lead over here. If you do this, it's going to lead over here. It's like if you hang around bad people, quote unquote bad people, you're going to be like them, right? And if you hang around people that work hard and like sweat and build, like just work with their bare hands and work hard, that stuff is going to glean. You're going to inherit that, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then, so I think for me, I've just been blessed from racing BMX to working at a company called GT Bicycles for 12, 13 years, whatever it was. Then working on to Trans World Motocross, and then moving on to Answer and Pro Taper, like you said, like all these companies, like I feel, and then going on to 661 Sunline back then, and then eventually moving here to Yoshimura, like I feel like the way I was able to do it because I loved it, right? And I think all these people that hired me in the past went, and I'm speculating, but they went, that guy loves what he does and he bleeds for the company. I like that. And whatever he does wrong, he's going to do wrong, whatever. But there's a core foundation there. Like he wants to do right. So let him do what he needs to do. Right.
Sure.
So you just learn through the process of attrition, and you learn how to not do stuff by stuff breaking or But those are the way the mistakes that you make help you be a better person the next day. Right?
Absolutely.
So
Yep.
I think if you let that happen, you just kind of build this brick wall up, and then all of a sudden you're like, wow, like you just say, how did you get there? It's like you just put the brick on one step at a time, and you do things the right way. And if you don't know the right way to do it, ask somebody that's been doing it, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And then you can use your brain and evaluate, like, hey, is that guy right or wrong? Hey, maybe I'll ask another guy, So,
Yeah.
and then you can get a better way of like, hey, maybe this is the right way to do it, right?
Absolutely.
So,
Let me
I don't
put you on
think
this.
I have a specific like recipe of like, okay, if you were going to have my life, here's the blueprint of how to do it. It's just bled out of a passion and a love for doing what you're doing. And then I was lucky enough for people to see that and go, hey, we want you here,
Yeah.
So,
well, that's where I'll politely disagree with you, because luck is where hard work meets opportunity. And you've always poured your blood, sweat, and tears into everything that you've done. Because if you go, for anybody who's listening, you go back and you listen to the things that you said. Like, I never heard of Sunstar. You went over there. I started hearing about Sunstar. Sunlight, excuse me. You go to Pro Taper. I'd never heard of Pro Taper. I'd heard of the Answer a little bit, right? But it's like everywhere that you've gone, all of a sudden there's this new sense of awareness. There's this new, it's kind of, I hope this doesn't come across the wrong way, but when I think of Bevo, I still think of Scott, right? To me, those were synonymous. And I look at yourself, you didn't have the same tenure that Bevo did at Scott, but everywhere you went, you became that brand. We're going to be showing during this show here, I'm going to be showing the B-roll on you doing the commercial. Not only you working for GT, but you're in the commercial and you're adding creative elements and you're adding creative ideas to this commercial. And the GT sales were the best. You've got Gary Ellis and some of these big bad dudes that we all grew up and loved. But you can see where your stamp is in all of that. Like your DNA is in all of it. And then I want to put you on the spot here. And like I said, we didn't orchestrate this conversation.
Before you say that, I just want to say thank you for seeing that, because I honestly that's the biggest compliment anybody can ever give somebody is like, hey, I can see your mark on that company.
Yep.
And honestly, that's so cool, because going into something, whether it was at GT, whatever I've been doing, that's been my prayer for just like, hey, if I'm going to do this job, I want to give it 110%. And I want the company to benefit from what I can give it. And so for you to say that is huge, because honestly, like, that's the best thing anybody can ever say is like, man, I could see that you were there. Well, dude, that's awesome,
Yeah, and I say that 100%. Like I said, there's nothing scripted here whatsoever. I saw it, and obviously because of our relationship going back to the early 80s, it's hard to imagine we're going on 40 years together, friends. My dad took me out of BMX after the 87 Worlds, literally drove me down to Seminole Community College and said, that's the admin building, go figure it out. I don't know if you remember, but I'm adopted into a family of 8. I'm number 9, right? No one in my family's ever gone to college. My dad literally, we did IBMXF Worlds on Saturday and Sunday. Monday morning, when we normally would do a recap, and I'd signed a letter of intent with Turnell Henry to go to KHS, Dad's like, hey, we're going to school. And I thought he was joking. And he just said it with a straight face. And if you remember Cool Pop, not Cool Dad, that's Todd's dad, but I always called my dad Cool Pops. He wasn't smiling, but he wasn't disrespectful or mean, or he's just like, no, you're done with this bike racing thing. And I'm like, how? Why? How'd I get here? Right. So all of a sudden it takes a different detour, but now I'm in college and I start doing triathlons. Then I get to the Olympic Training Center as a development athlete, and I'm still getting Racer X, motocross action, dirt, trans world. Oh, there's Big E. Wow, check it out. There's Big E, right? You go to Racer X and there's those pictures in the front at the races, and there's Big E. And if I'm not mistaken, Ernesto Fonseca, your first Answer rider?
He was, yeah. When I went to Answer, that was one of the big things. I'm like, hey, we need to spend money on a top athlete, because we had Mad Mike Jones. He was a freestyle guy at the time.
Yep.
And I'm like, hey, we need to rebrand this thing, and we need to put this thing on that kind of back. And I knew Ernesto, again, going back to the Jeremy McGrath thing, like he always hung around Jeremy and Jimmy Button.
Yep.
And
two legends.
Like, hey, dude,
two legends.
Yep. And I said, he's the guy I want. He's the guy on Honda, and he's going to make a difference for us. So that's,
and the rest is history.
Yeah.
Well, and that's what I think is so cool, because here I am, I'm going to college and I'm racing triathlons and I'm still getting the moto magazines. They're still my favorite, right? And there's Big E. He's in Trans World, and then also he's on Racer X, and here and there. And I'm like, this is so cool. And then the Toyota Moving Forward program calls me through Tim Cotter, and he's like, hey, I don't know if you realize this, but my ex-wife's cousin's with Tim Cotter. So Tim Cotter knows what I'm doing. He's like, hey, Toyota wants to get into this amateur development program. And that's when they did that program where they selected 10 riders. And at the end of the year, whoever won got to go on to the Cowie team. And Sean Hackley won it that year. But my point being is that's how I got drawn back into the sport. And then I've already seen that you're there, right? I'm like, holy cow, check this out. I mean, we've gone from, my parents had Beams BMX, but the t-shirts, and you and TC are doing your camps and doing your clinics. And then I remember I get out of the sport and I get a BMX action out of the Publix, and there's Todd doing the interview when he signed with Auburn. I was like, this is freaking awesome. I have it right here. It's right here in my office. Literally, it's right next to me.
So rad.
I have one green bin, and it's the book. It's one of them in BMX Action's Terrible 10. When TC made it with Terry Tennant and Townsend and all those guys and Eric Carter, I have all of them sitting right here next to me, 5 feet away from me doing this, right? It's still what motivates me today to be better. I mean, I looked at that Terrible 10. I put it on my wall every year it came out.
But you see what you're saying, Lo? I just don't mean to interrupt you, but you see
go for it.
About these early influences in your life, how important they are. And I really feel like, you know, with social media the way it is, I just don't feel like a lot of the athletes and just general kids growing up they don't have that anymore.
No, sir.
Kids are just, there's not a lot of cool stuff to look up to, I should say, nowadays. It's hard because
well, they get rid of friends as easy as they slide, right?
Yeah.
as what they call it, swipe left, swipe right, whatever.
Yeah.
Right? 5 seconds attention. Oh, I can't get anything out of you, so I'm just going to do away with you. And I agree with you. As bad of an analogy as it is,
yeah,
I totally agree. And it's still cool to me because I go out to California, and you know, small little world, right? All of a sudden you have Hook It, and then you have Rich Houseman. And I remember the first time I contacted, and I was like, wait, Rich Houseman's a pretty unique name. I go, did you race BMX by chance? Now I still remember him as the small little guy on Hutch, right? So I'm still stuck in a time warp. I'm thinking it's 84, 85. He's still that little dude that's racing with Chase Digit and Shelby's little brother, Bobby, and all those, right? And I'm like, no, dude, you're running Hook It now? Wait a second, wait. Then I see Eric Carter killing it on the mountain bike scene. And then I see Aaron Gwen go on to downhill. And I remember seeing him on a motorcycle. And I'm like, wow, it all cross germinates. Mm-hmm. And then now all of a sudden here you are with Answer. And I remembered when you got Ernesto Fonseca. And I remember you'd see pictures of you and Ernie, and bless his heart, you know, I hope he's doing well. Obviously, I don't know him personally. I don't have any way to communicate with him. I hope he's doing well. But then things transition. You go from GT, then you end up over there, like you say, going through those different chapters with Pro Taper and Answer and all that. Once again, how did you navigate getting into Yoshimura? I know you'll say it's luck, but I think that's where hard work meets opportunity. How did you end up at the Yoshimura?
But I think a lot of people, I think, and I appreciate that, Rob, but I think there's a lot of people that put a lot of hard work in that don't get that opportunity. So that's where I think I've just been blessed with those people that have seen something in me that said, hey man, I want what you have here. And I think humility goes a long way. And I think, you know, not thinking that you're all that, because really you're just a big clod of dirt, you know.
Amen. Yeah.
You know? So I think a lot of people need to probably think a little bit more like that. Like, hey, you really, like you were saying early on, you just put your pants on one leg at a time. It's not, some people are more gifted at others at some things, but at the end of the day, we have red blood in us, and it's not, we need to be more kind to each other, I guess. But
absolutely.
But yeah, I don't, you know, working with a guy like Dungey, you know, I saw him early on and at Answer. And I was fortunate enough to know Roger DeCoster really well. And I'm like, hey man, there's this young kid. And for whatever reason, Cole Gress didn't see, or he didn't, you know, Dungey was a B rider and he wasn't ready to move up to the A. That was Nico Izzy.
Yep.
And they didn't really want to push Dungey. And I'm like, dude, this guy has what it takes, Raj. And so that one day, that famous day that we went out to Glen Helen and Brock Tickle was in what's his last name? He was on Suzuki at the time. I forgot.
Ben Riddle
from Pennsylvania.
Brock Tickle.
No, not Tickle.
Hepler.
Brock Hepler. He was injured. Dungey got to ride his bike that day at Glen Helen, And I just kept saying, like, to Roger and Ian, I'm like, watch this kid's turn speed. It's unbelievable how fast he has so much momentum through the turns. And he wound up crashing a couple of times. Then when everything was like, oh, my tryout's over, he went back on the track and was just blitzing everything, dude, at Glen Helen. And they were like, holy cow,
Yeah,
this kid's really fast. And just his, his physical makeup was just very different too. Like they saw, like, he's got some physio that a lot of people don't have, and he's just a hard worker. And, just working with athletes like that and being able to, I feel, and I'm sure at some point Dungey would have came on the radar, but I feel like super blessed that I was able to, like, just basically said, hey, Roger DeCoster, here's Ryan Dungey, watch him ride.
yeah, just facilitating it is everything.
I remember driving to Glen Helen, and he was like, he didn't even eat breakfast that morning. He was too nervous. Like, dude, you need to eat something, right? But
Yeah,
wanted to go out there and ride his dirt bike. And it was just and then, and then I was watching something the other day. I'm like, dude, this kid's a Hall of Famer now, has 2 kids.
exactly.
Like, it's so cool to go, I can call him up right now and go, hey, Ryan, what's up, dude?
Yep. Well, it's funny
And
you say that, because I was working with a gentleman by the name of Spencer Dally. Spencer Dally was John Martin with Millville, put this little 3-man team together. You have Jay Martin on an 85, you had Alex on a 250, and Spencer was on a 250. Mr. Martin hired me to manage that 3-man team. Well, Spencer ends up becoming Dungey's best man in his wedding. Dungey's now moved to Tallahassee, is looking for somebody, so he hires me for a year. So now I get to work with Dungey for a year, right after he had just gone to KTM his first year, right? So now I'm up there in Tallahassee with him. I'm still living based out of Apopka, but I'm driving up 4 hours. I'm there with him Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. He'd fly out on Thursday. I would drive home. And you think about how small that little world is. You and I go back to the early 80s in BMX. You're saying, hey, Rod, check this guy out. 15 years later, I'm working with him in Tallahassee, and here we are talking about him in 2024. It's like, I mean, scratch yourself, pinch yourself. Like, are we really having this conversation? You put the bug in Roger's ear to check this guy out. You facilitated putting that together. Then I can just picture the Ryan with the little earring in his left ear, and you're sitting there talking to him, going, "Man, it's okay. Just go out there and be yourself." And Dunn just got that Minnesota, oh shucks kind of guy, super humble, just like all the Martin brothers are. And look at us now, Jeremy Martin, national champion, Dunge, national champion multiple times over, Alex Martin doing a great job. So yeah, it goes back to a small little world. And then you're out there riding mountain bikes with Cubby, probably the most famous. I don't know, I only remember BMX action with Gork and Wendy. You and TC had all those relationships, but to me, I look at Gork and Wendy, and I look at Cubby over on this side of things, and I don't think he's quite as busy as he used to be. But look at who you're rubbing elbows with. You're just going out mountain biking with Cubby. Even if he's moved, you're still riding bikes with him. You're still riding with TC. I think Rex is out there in California. I don't know if you guys get to see each other very often, but it's a good group all the way around. So
but I think honestly, like again, you just point back to that foundation. The foundation was laid right.
Yeah.
And there's relationships there. And, again, you do things right for the long term, not like what's going to happen in a year.
yes.
I didn't have any desire that Ryan Dungey goes on and wins all these championships that he did. I just saw talent in the kid, and I was basically connecting somebody to another person because I thought that it needed to happen, right?
Yep.
Because that was the right thing to do.
Exactly. We had a gentleman who, we have a membership area. We had a gentleman who got his credit card charged for 3 months, and he brought it to our attention, but he only caught 1 month. And I had my accounting department go back, and he essentially paid for 3 months that he never utilized it. So I wrote him a check for 3 months back, and he was blown away that I'd write him a check. I said, you paid for something you didn't use.
Yeah.
It's dumbfounding to me that when you do the right things, all of a sudden now it's like people are aghast by it. They're like, oh my gosh. I'm like, I don't need a pat on the back. I don't need to be on a billboard or a 6 o'clock news. You just do the right things. Yeah. But it is amazing how it's become almost a novelty now.
Yeah.
You're there.
But I think a lot of it comes back though, dude, honestly, like if you do the right thing, maybe not from that person reciprocally, but just in general, you just laying things out there and the whole pad, you can sleep better at night because you did it the
Amen.
right way, you know? So
Well, it's funny
that's
you
kind of
say
my
that.
motto. Do it the
Yep.
right way.
You and I are two brothers from another mother, because I say it in our staff meetings every week. I sleep very good at night because I know that I've never ruined somebody's health.
Yeah.
Now, I don't say that boastfully. There's a ton of resources that we put into it. There's a ton of analytics that we put into it, but that's what we are. We're a performance company that's based on analytics.
Yeah.
I will guarantee you, if you ever send me a rider, I will make sure that they never get run down, because a fatigue related disease is the easiest thing in the physiology world to avoid, but yet it's the number one thing that plagues our sport.
Yeah.
And like we talked about, I can't imagine being in a position like you and Yoshimura putting tens of millions of dollars into R&D to put it on a bike that an athlete's too tired to ride, whether that's Mitch, whether that's Bobby Reagan, whether that's Yoshimura, Lars at Honda, all the other teams that you guys support. I have a responsibility to the entire platform. That rider is somebody's son, somebody's partner. It's an investment that you, Yoshimura, have put into Honda, that Honda's put into that rider. To me, our foundation has to be absolutely unbreakable,
Yeah.
because you guys are putting money into a team. And
Yeah.
how many times, I'm not going to name any team managers, but I can tell you half a dozen of them that call me and they're like, how come I show up and the bikes are ready, but the riders show up and they're not ready? And I'm like, well, I don't work with your rider. I can't answer that question.
Maybe you didn't build the foundation right.
Comes back full
But I
circle.
mean, I'm just honestly, like, just because I know we don't have a lot of time here, but
Yes, sir.
that's one of the coolest things about working for Yoshimura, and I've been here since 2013, is I really feel, and I've said this before in other podcasts, I think, I really feel like our company gets it in the fact, like, our customer service is right. Like, if you have a problem, we're going to try to fix it for you.
Yeah.
We try to do things the right way all the time. Now, that's the bullseye on the door when we walk in the morning, and like, that's the one we're aiming for. And there's times we don't hit it, right? But that's what we want to do every day, is we want to be the best we possibly can. And I feel like, you know, whether it's Ichi, who is the guy back there making all the factory Honda pipes, or Bert, the guy that's repacking them, all the things that happen, like, everybody is, for the most part, rowing the boat the right direction, the same direction. Because, hey, do your job the best, this is how you do it. Do your job the best, this is how you do it. And then when you get to hang our exhaust system on a guy like Jet Lawrence's bike, or Ken Roxon's bike previously, or Trey Kennard's bike before him, you can put your head on the pillow and go, like, we did everything we possibly could to make that exhaust system the best we possibly could. We're not cutting corners.
Absolutely.
And that's why we've been with Honda since the end of 2005. It's just, they see a quality in the product that we make. They see a service that we provide, and they're like, we don't need to look anywhere else, because Yoshimura is the best. We don't desire anything else. You guys deliver everything that you can possibly deliver. And it's honestly like the same thing what we're doing. So since April 2020, we started Yoshimura Cycling, and we make pedals and stems flat, like, it's a high performance flat pedal. So we're going into a space where there's a lot of people that don't know who Yoshimura is. And they're like, whoa, that's a $200 pedal. I don't know. But over the last 4.5, almost 5 years now, like, we've gained this reputation in the industry. Like, those guys are going to take care of you. You have a problem with their product, just call them. That's it. And we're going to make it right, because we try to make the best product we can, but sometimes it doesn't work, or sometimes something fails. I mean, everything's going to break at some point.
Yes.
We're going to stand in back of our product. So I guess, just to circle around, I'm just really thankful to be working for a company that is like-minded. Like, I want to do the best I can. So does this company. And I've seen internally, and we could talk for hours on this, where we were like, hey, we're not putting that product out there. It's not right. Fix it. Open the boxes.
Yeah.
Rather than, let's let the consumer get it, and if he has a problem, he'll call us. That's not
absolutely. That's awesome.
So I just feel fortunate to work for a company that says, when we have meetings, manager meetings upstairs with our executives, it's like, nope, we're not doing it like that. That's not the right thing to do. Don't treat somebody like that. Those are the things that happen in our conversations that I guarantee that doesn't happen at, I'm not saying other exhaust companies, but
Understood.
within the moto community, or even in the bicycle community, they're always about chasing a dollar. I get it. But I really feel like going back to the McGrath mentality, focus on your racing and do the best you can. all the other stuff is going to fall in line. The sponsors, the people you need to relate with, your managers, all that stuff's going to fall in line if you do the best you possibly can and focus on that. And
100%.
that's really what we do here at Yoshimura. So
No, I love it.
sorry for that little.
No, I think it provides insight, because that's why I wanted to have you on the show. You've always mesmerized me with wherever you've gone, you've had the Midas touch. And that doesn't come easily. There wasn't a blueprint that you followed. You didn't come from wasn't silver spoon fed to you. You have fight and clawed for credibility. Everywhere you've gone, like I said, it's very noticeable. And then when you look at the idea, here you are in the career that you're at right now. And I apologize, how many years total have you been at Yoshi?
I don't know, what is it, 11? Since
11,
13.
12 years. Yeah. So you look at, you don't see longevity like that with companies very often. You don't see a company that's been around as long as Yoshi has. That doesn't happen accidentally either. But now
But that's funny. Like, what's cool about Yoshimura too, and I don't mean to keep harping on it.
No, you're good, man.
You walk around here, we have about 100 employees, maybe
Okay.
fluctuates between 90 and 100 depending. But there's guys that are here 37 years, 35 years.
There you go.
Years. Like and that's why we can't move to Tennessee and make exhaust systems cheaper, because there's families here.
That's right.
You just don't learn how to do that stuff, and you don't say, "Hey, we're leaving, bye."
Yeah.
And so
now you're back to
there's a community of it's not just a company. There's a family of workers here.
It's integrity. I love it. It's the thread of integrity that, we could go cheaper, but we're going to disrupt 95 people, and that's not worth it. Cost benefit isn't there for us.
Yeah, it changed. If you walk in here, and you can probably go on YouTube and probably see a couple of tours, but as soon as you walk in past our live, there's pictures of our employees lined up all over the halls.
Nice.
And I told Yusaku Yoshimura, I'm like, hey man, I have this idea. I just kind of want to feature I want to put our employees on the wall. Those are the ones that are making it happen every day. He's like, let's do it.
Amen.
So when you walk in, there's welders and tubing cutters and like guys packing boxes. I'm like, that's Yoshimura.
Yeah.
Those are the guys
that's your brother, that's your sister, there's your cousin, it's his family. And it's
100%.
the same way, like going into your own house with your beautiful daughters and your beautiful wife. You're proud of them, right? I mean, that's what it's 100%. All about. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you had mentioned earlier, and I say this with all of my clients, I think there's no such thing as pressure. There's a thing called preparation, and then there's a thing called privilege. And when you are on the line for a championship, there's not pressure, that's a privilege. When you are on the starting gate at the Grands, right? You're one of the fast ATIS pros. It comes down to this right here. It's one gate drop, and it's the national championship, the ABA Grands, all the things that you've been through. Like I say, the similarities and what competition does in life. A lot of people would say, oh my gosh, that would be so much pressure. You've got Jet, doing what he's done. Obviously, hindsight's 2020. We've seen what he's done since he's gone 450. What has been your coping mechanism when you're in a situation like that? Take any of Jet's championships, excuse me.
As far as pressure?
Yeah, because there'll be listeners that'll say, oh, that's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, I think you touched on it. I really feel like, you do the homework and then you go take the test. And some people aren't good at taking tests. You've seen that, right?
Yes.
And so I don't, but I think there's for the champion mindset, those that can really say, hey, I've done the homework. I can relax now. Again, like going back to the camera McAdoo thing, like my feet are here. I'm planted in this moment. Like, I don't need to think about next year. I need to enjoy this race I'm at right now. And that means enjoy the hard work that I put in and enjoy the gate drop and enjoy every bit of the 30 minutes plus 2 or whatever, if it's supercar, whatever it is, right?
Sure.
And so I really feel like those people that succeed in life and racing and everything, it's how they handle that. I will call it pressure.
Yeah.
But it's how they internalize it, right? You can let it fall off the back and use it for a positive, or you can let your muscles tighten up and then you fail the test, right? Wait, you did all this homework, but physically you let your mind think about what if? No, dude, you did all the homework. Like,
yeah,
I love what Chance Hymas said. I was just listening to an interview with him today, and he was saying, he talked to his dad before he went out. He's like, dude, just be loose and if you take a wrong line, just let it flow, man. Just go. Don't fight it. And you watch that kid race his second moto, and that's exactly what he did. He let it come to him rather than pushing for it, right?
Absolutely. Well, I
So I
always
don't know
say
if that answers your
pressure. I
question,
always say
but
pressure either makes you a pile of rubble or it makes you a diamond. And it's fascinating when you look at the process. That's why I always say it's a privilege. You've earned the
yeah,
right to have that gear deal. You've worked hard. You've put in the sweat equity for that OEM deal, the pipe deal, the goggle deal, the gloves, the boots, and all that goes with it. You've worked so hard. Especially for the younger athletes that are getting into some of their newer deals, I say, look, you've put 5 years into that opportunity. That didn't just fall on your lap. It didn't just all of a sudden become an idea. It's just like when you start winning championships. Well, of course, you're going to get that 450 offer. And yes, that's going to be seven figures, but you can't be surprised with it because that's part of the evolution of success.
yeah. But I think where it goes back, if you rewind a little bit,
Yeah.
taking that test, and if you look and like, hey, did I do the homework? Did I give it 100% on that day or that week of training? You know, maybe, you know, there's of course those
Sure.
days where like, hey, I can't do anymore. This is all I got.
Yep.
But that's where the integrity part comes in, and that's where like, you know, the kind of person that you are is everything, right?
Sure.
That integrity of like, hey, I gave it 110% and it didn't work, and then and taking that on the chin and going, hey, do I want to keep pushing forward or do I move on to the next thing? And so that's, you know, obviously that DNA, everybody's built differently, but I feel like, you know, in the business that you're in, a lot of that stuff can be really sifted through a lot easier than, again, it's just foundational stuff. I think that a lot of people,
100%.
they're like, oh, they're worried about going 150 miles an hour on the freeway. Like, did you learn how to turn the car yet?
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
did you learn the basics of the gyro of the motorcycle as it's falling into a turn? Did you learn the basics of, there's so many basic things. That's where I think, and I obviously we are a 4-stroke company, but there are so many bike handling skills that you learn with a 2-stroke motorcycle that it's hard to learn on a 4-stroke motorcycle
Sure.
because it's a different mechanic, right? But you know, you look at those 80s and 90s races, like I always think about Kenworthy's at Troy, Ohio, and you look at Kevin Windham on a 125, and I'm like, dude, that guy looks like he's on a mountain bike in the woods.
Absolutely.
But the body English and making that motorcycle work with a clutch and keeping it on a specific, you
Yep.
know, those are the
On that
days
little
when you
sweet
had to
spot.
ride a motorcycle, right? Like,
Yes. Yeah. If you
so
fell off the pipe, you were pretty much walking because you weren't going
you're
anywhere.
losing momentum and you're losing
Yep.
time.
And like you say, you're still racing the Troy Ohios and you're still dealing the Millvilles. It's kind of like going over to Loma, right? I mean, they've got 85s out there doing 30-minute motos. They don't make
Yeah.
excuses. There's Loma, there's the
Yeah.
85 class, and there's your 20-minute moto. Go do it. And yeah, I'm with you 100%. Well, I know you've got to bounce here. I've always got a couple questions at the end, and the listeners really love this, just kind of a rapid fire. What's your guilty pleasure, brother?
I don't know if it's a guilt. I love riding my mountain bike, and I
Mm,
love riding my mountain bike with friends. Like
I love
riding
it.
your mountain bike's cool, but
Yeah,
man, when you're doing it with your friends, there's nothing like it. So that's kind of, I'd say, my guilty first thing that comes to mind.
I love it. If you found $100, what would you do with it?
Give it to somebody that needs it.
If I could give you $100,000 to start a company, what would be your side hustle that you'd love to do? Something you'd like to start?
Oh, that's a hard one, dude. Wow, that's a really hard question. Do you have that 100 grand?
Give it a shot, right? If you send it over, then you'll make a
Um,
decision.
Honestly, I think I'd probably invest it into some kind of a cool product that could actually make motorcycles or bicycles better.
I love it.
Yeah.
And there's no boundaries on this one. In your opinion, who's the most influential person you have in your phone right now?
In
In
my
in
phone, or one that I could actually pick up and talk to.
in your phone.
Hmm. Influential.
In your
That's
terms,
that's another.
not what the listeners think would be powerful, but from your standpoint, who's the most influential person?
A guy that I work with every day named Colin Timmermans.
Cool.
He's our cycling, or one guy that does our cycling stuff.
Okay.
And I see so much of me in him, the passion bleeding out, doing things the right way. Anyway, I don't want to wax long, but in my phone, that would be him because I really feel like he influences the way I used to when I was younger, for
I
sure.
love it. If you could get anybody's phone number in your phone, who would it be?
Gosh, I could have answered that this morning because I was looking through social media. I'm like, if I could only talk to that guy.
I love it.
Gosh, I don't know, man. Like, I see it so much just scrolling through social media. Like, if I could just influence, what was your question? If I could influence somebody?
If you could get anybody's phone number, who would it be? Somebody that you'd like to talk to. And it doesn't even have to be in moto. It could be just in life in general.
I don't know, just off the top of my head, Loic Bruni.
And if you could get them on the phone, what would be your first question?
What do you do every day to be who you are?
Mm.
Loic Bruni is like 8-time World Cup champion.
Absolutely.
Mountain bike. So
yep, absolutely. No, I love those rapid fire because I always try to catch people off guard. And it's just cool though, because when you look at these types of questions, it just surmises the type of person that you are, Big E. And like I said, I want to have you come over to the Navigating Amateur Motocross. I think it'd be important. On behalf of everybody that supports the Coach Robb podcast, man, I just want to say thank you. I know you're extremely busy. I love what you're doing for the Yoshi brand. And we talked a little bit before we went live and some things I'm working with. So hopefully we can connect some dots here in the next year. But man, thank you very, very much. I'm gonna leave the floor open for you. Is there anything that you want to say as we shut down the show?
no, I just want to say thanks for having me on. Number one, I think it goes without saying, but I appreciate our friendship through the years, and it's good to see you healthy and behind the mic and smiling. Yeah, I just honestly, I guess the parting words I have is first I'd love to come back on if you'll have me.
Absolutely.
But I think the biggest thing is we live in a freaking crazy world nowadays, dude. And I always I just think we need to be a lot nicer to each other, because I think we're a lot we all have differences, but at the end of the day, like, if you're nice to somebody, like, I always make the analogy. I remember my mom, the last time she was out here in California, she was in the airport and there was this African American lady, and she had like very African garb on. She had her hair all done up. And my mom just went over to her and said, "Oh, I love your hair. It looks so beautiful." And dude, you should have seen the lady light up. It's just like conversation starter, like, "Thank you so much." And anyway, long story short, I think that positivity goes a long way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we just need to be nicer to each other. I think there's enough angst and animosity in the world, and there's probably a place for that, but not in the circles. Like, we're not curing cancer here with BMX or with moto or with mountain biking or whatever the sport that you're into. Yeah, enjoy it, man.
I love it. That's great words. Well, Big E, again, on behalf of everybody who subscribes to this channel and listens, thank you for your time, and we can't wait to talk to you again soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you.